So what's going on guys, Kids here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the new best weapon tier list in Elden Ring 2024. So this game has massive amount of fun and powerful weapons that we can play, and we have a very unique variety to choose from. But the big question is, which weapons can actually perform the best and do the highest damage and much more. So I've done a bunch of testing and here's the best tier list that you've been waiting for, including all the newly released patch notes and weapon changes. So, if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So then moving over to the S tier, and as Elden Ring has over 300 different weapons, so right now here on the screen you can see all the weapons that deserve to be placed in this S tier. And as to not make this video super long, so I will just explain and introduce you to some of my personal favorite ones. So let's start with the Blasphemous Blade. This is by far one of the best greatsword weapons in the game, with very high damage and self-healing. This weapon scales primarily with the strength, dexterity and fate, and additionally it will deal fire damage. I personally love this weapon with my strength/fate build. Even without the Ashes of War, the base damage this thing does is on par with insanely rare weapons. Then next up we have the Luset's Glintstone Staff. This is again known as the most OP staff, and mainly the sorcery scaling is the only stat that matters, and Luset's has by far the highest, but it will make your spells cost 50% more focus points. So if you're looking for a staff to melt your enemies as fast as possible, but by using as few spells as possible, then Luset's staff is definitely for you. And then finally, for my last favorite weapon, we have the Rivers of Blood Katana. It scales primarily with strength, dexterity and arcane, and is insane for mid to range combat, as it's capable of inflicting both slash and pierce attacks, and the Rivers of Blood is more known for its insane bleed, as it's used for speedrunning through the Elden Ring bosses. So then moving over to the A tier, and again all the weapons that you can right now see are definitely worth to be placed in this category. I would say that most of this tier has very strong weapons, and with the selected right builds and most optimal setups, these weapons are as good as the S tier choices. So then with that said, for my recommendation I would go with the Bastard Star. This is a flail weapon that scales primarily with strength, dexterity and intelligence, and is an all-around good weapon for intelligence-based builds. This weapon has insane skills that control spacing very well, so it will be hard to get through you if you know how to use this weapon. Flail in the right hand and staff in the left can create an unstoppable battle mage. In my opinion, this is a very underrated weapon, and one of my most favorite ones for sure. Then next up we have the Black Knife. This is a dagger that scales primarily with fate and dexterity, and is an insane weapon for dealing additional holy damage and for its unique skill called the Blade of Death, that allows the user to fire additional projectiles. This is by far one of the best weapons in this category, as you can wipe through most of the challenging bosses very quickly, and it's very fun for PvP. So then moving over to the B tier, and here we have a lot of weapons that are one of the last good choices, that can still be viable when used with the right build. So then for the first one we have the Axe of Godric. This weapon will scale primarily with strength and dexterity, and is a good weapon for melee characters that prefer slow but powerful attacks. I personally think that this has to be one of the most criminally underrated weapons in Elden Ring, as this axe looks super cool, it has super satisfying and powerful moveset, and the weapon skills can be used for both PvE and PvP. Watching enemies fly into the air never gets old, so it's probably one of my most favorite quality weapons for sure. Then next up we have the Crystal Spear. It scales primarily with dexterity, and is a good weapon for short range melee combat that can inflict magic based attacks. Overall, this weapon has less stat requirements than a similar weapon called the Moonveil. The Crystal Spear is extremely useful on a pure Glintstone sorcerer caster, who will typically have a harder time dealing with a big tower shielding enemy. And this would be probably one of the best magic spears if you could infuse it with the Ashes of War onto it. So then moving over to the C tier, and all of the weapons in this category are an average choices that are neither good or bad, and are mainly used in the early to mid game content. So for my first recommendation I have the Albinaric Bow. This bad boy scales primarily with strength and dexterity, and is a good weapon for long ranged combat. This bow is known for being annoying to farm, but in the right player hands you can outperform all the other long-range weapons in this category by using the right bow build that should be complemented with a blue dancer charm, arrow sting talisman, ritual sword talisman, and the spear talisman. Then for the next one we have the bandit's curved sword. This weapon scales primarily with strength and dexterity, and is a good weapon for high dexterity characters who can excel at slashing attacks while spinning. So if you're a Diablo player, then this weapon will give you that spin to win type of playstyle. This sword is better than most katanas, and is definitely very similar to the Shabal, but just much curvier and longer. I would say that the bandit is perfect as one of the sidearms for a winged hussards build. Then taking a closer look at the D tier, and here we have weapons that are slightly below average, and that should be used only in the early game, or perhaps if you don't care about performance and metas, but you just enjoy the way the weapon looks or feels. So with that said, my first choice is the Alabaster's Lord Sword. This thing scales primarily with strength and secondarily with dexterity and intelligence. The Ashes of War for this weapon have amazing utility in PvP, and overall the low weight and good damage makes this weapon a must-have. Then next up we have a more funnier looking weapon called the Celebrant's Skull, which is a warhammer that scales primarily with strength and dexterity, and is a decent weapon for high strength players who can easily hold this weapon's weight. This weapon is extremely easy to get, so you pretty much don't even need to farm it, and for any witch build you can easily make this weapon work. And if you want to progress even further with this guy, then put Waves of Darkness to beat even stronger bosses. Then for one of the last categories we have the E tier. Sadly this is the tier that has very weak choices, and mostly you will see basic weapons that are decent but not good. So we have the Arbalest. This crossbow does not scale with any primary attribute, but requires both strength and dexterity. It is an average weapon for those who prefer ranged combat. As I said, weapons here won't be great, but at least the high base damage of the crossbow and the lack of scaling means that you will have the route of investing in 33 Fate as soon as possible, so this will help you to boost your high base damage with the Howl of Shabiri and the Golden Vow. And I appreciate that the unchangeable skill on the Arbalest is at least a kick, so you have a great answer for blocking enemies. And then lastly we have the Scythe. This weapon is a Reaper that scales primarily with the strength and dexterity, and is a good weapon for inflicting bloodlust effect, along with the physical damage. At the early stages of my Elden Ring playthrough, I was bad at PvP, but I was landing so many meme hits on people because of this weapon's size, the shape and moveset reaches, that I had to mention it. Usually I would feel like I missed, and then at the end of the swing, I hit a guy that is 2 meters diagonally behind me. So if you're a massive swinger with your eyes closed type of player, then this is the weapon for you. And now finally we have come to the F tier, where you will see the bottom of the barrel, the worst and the lowest ranking weapons in this tier list. As most people say, use what you like the most, so you might disregard this information, but for educational purposes, here are the F tier weapons. My first choice is the Kestus, which is a fist. The Kestus scales primarily with strength and dexterity, and this thing is for melee characters looking for extra bonus to damage protection because of the Kestus and durability that reduces the damage taken while in use. This weapon is insanely good in PvE, as this is the best fist weapon that you can get early on, but please only use it for your first few moments after you start a new game, and then later choose a weapon that is from a higher tier. And then last but not the least we have the Raptor's Talons. This thing scales primarily with strength and dexterity, and is a good weapon for dealing an extra bloodlust effect, on top of the physical damage this weapon causes. It is a lightweight piece and can be equipped on both hands. This weapon has high AR when keen, fantastic heavy attacks, which can be buffed, extremely low weight for Blue Dancer Charm, increased jump attack motion value, high crit damage and super fast attacks. This is by far my most favorite beginner friendly weapon in Elden Ring, and that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or maybe you have a different idea about a weapon on this Elden Ring tier list, then you are feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and not miss any more amazing content. With that said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in my next video, so take it easy, peace.